let's talk about surviving modern history. Because I think modern history, and I don't care to say it, like it's other people are gonna be like, oh no, and anytime I've said this, they're like, oh, what about maths? What about physics? What about chem? And I'm not sitting here saying modern history is the hardest HSC subject, but I think it is one of the hardest HSC subjects, and not specifically in terms of content and that like the content is super super hard. The content is hard, it is heavy, and there's obviously so much that makes it hard. But a lot of people are like, oh, the content is just stories, it's just memorizing stories from the past. It's literally not. I made a TikTok about the modern history exam because the way that it's structured, you're literally doing 50 marks of short answer and then two 25-mark essays on like literally 4 dot points out of how many in the national case study in the other topic too. So I just think that the modern history exam is one of the hardest assessed HSC exams. There's obviously no multiple choice. And it's just straight writing, straight facts, straight detail across a huge syllabus. So personally, I think modern history is one of the hardest. It's definitely one of the most content heavy subjects, and I think without a doubt it is one of the hardest humanities subjects personally. So I don't know, I haven't met many people that love modern history, and when I was doing it I wasn't the biggest fan because it's very easy to drown in it. I feel like you miss one lesson of modern history and you feel like you're a term behind, only because of how the syllabus is structured as well. So let me be honest with you, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like modern is so easy to just smash out and such a light subject to study for. It's literally not, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about studying for it and getting through it. So this is just a reminder before we begin that modern is hard. Do not let anyone tell you that it's not. Anytime that I've complained about modern, I'm just hit with the, oh, like what about extension 1 math? Oh, what about physics? And the science subjects. But I feel like battling like the math science subjects against like such a heavy like content subject, not a fair battle, they're very different subjects, but just the nature of the actual HSC exam as well and how modern is assessed, really hard, but the scaling is really good for it. It's one of the top scaling humanities subjects, so trust that that's going to pull you through. And there's obviously ways to get around all the content, and there's smarter ways that you can study rather than studying super super hard. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I just wanted to put that out there because when I was doing modern, I know like all my class would complain and we'd all be like, oh, modern's so hard, but I wouldn't, like whenever I heard past achievers talking about modern, I just never heard anyone like speak about it in like and confirm that it was hard or that it was difficult. It was just kind of talked about very conversationally. I'm like, but modern is so hard. So I just want to confirm that to all of you guys that it is a hard subject, but scaling will help you. And if you're studying in a smart way, you're going to finesse it. So these are some of my tips. So staying on top of content is so important. It's one thing to say it and then one thing to do it. But modern history is so notoriously known for having like such high amounts of content. So you want to make sure you stay on top of your work. And I swear, like you fall behind on one lesson or you don't do your notes one time and suddenly you're super, super behind. So I really recommend staying on top of it as much as you can. If you're away one lesson, ask your friend and pray that your friend keeps up on their notes. But ask your friend, go up to your teacher, ask what was done. Try to go out of your way to stay up on content. Because a lot of the content connects to, and then it goes back to this point, and then sometimes in the essay questions they'll connect 2 dot points together, and you don't want to miss it. You don't want to fall behind on anything. Everything really intertwines nicely in modern. I feel like within the syllabus, like each point is building off each other. So staying on top of content is so important. You guys do have school holidays now, and trust, I'm not one to be like study every second, 6-hour study days, all holidays. No, I didn't even do that. But I think that the holidays are a good time to just go back over some dot points and try to just, it's not even necessarily, I don't even advise these holidays like trying to get ahead on any work. Just try to make sure you're up to date and you're at where your class is, because that's a good pace to move at. Now, so we had to stay for modern. The main study method is notes, I think, and the general consensus is that notes for modern is the main study method, and I think that's such a good base study method, but I just don't personally recommend it stopping there. I think stopping at notes is dangerous because, again, the way that the HSC is assessed and the way that your trials is going to be as well, you're going to get 50 marks a short answer and then 50 marks worth of essays. So you want to make sure that your study method isn't just notes and learning notes, because you're learning all this content, but you don't actually get to practice applying it. And yeah, I had friends who had heaps of notes, like 30, 40 pages. Um, of notes for all these different topics, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have even more than that. If you just stop at those notes and all you've done is study those and you haven't practiced applying them, you're not gonna find that it's showing up as much in your marks as it would if you were practicing applying them too. So of course, you guys aren't at a point now where you can do a full pass paper, because I'm not sure, especially like only having like being halfway through now, that any of you guys in class would have finished the entire syllabus like content yet. So in terms of like doing a full past paper, a lot of advice you'll find online is start doing past papers, start doing past papers. Don't do a full past paper until you've finished all the content. So don't worry about past papers now. If anything, you can worry about past paper sections. So I'm sure a lot of you guys would have already finished the course study. And that's where you can sit down and just set a 45-minute timer and do like that first section. Or if you guys have finished your national study, you can start looking at like writing practice essays and like drafting out essays. But otherwise, writing a full past paper now is just a bit much, I think. I think that I don't even know how you would do it if you haven't finished the content. So definitely try to ignore advice coming at this point this early in the year. Definitely as you get closer to trials and as you finish more and more content. But if you guys have not finished all the content yet, don't push yourself with past papers. And also do not push yourself with past papers and practice questions if you don't feel confident with your notes. You want to start, and I mean this across different subjects as well. What's the point of doing practice questions if you're doing the questions and you've got no clue how to answer them? Feel more confident with your notes and the content first. Teach yourself that first. And then when you get confident with that and when you start to feel like, okay, I feel like I could answer a question to this, then go and practice with a past practice question. Now, I know other people are literally going to say the opposite, and they're going to be like, do practice questions first, find out what you know and you don't. But I feel like you can make more use out of your practice questions when you already go in confident, rather than going in, you've just typed all these notes and then you're just going to do practice questions. Because let's be realistic, lots of us are writing notes in different ways. You can write notes and you can craft your own notes and sit there in full focus, and you're actually studying while you're writing those notes, and you're learning it and teaching it while you're writing those notes. And others are studying with Spotify on, copying the textbook, copy and pasting stuff from work, like from other notes, like putting all different stuff together. And there's no issue with either. It's not even like that's bad. Like I was doing that all the time. I had my like study playlist. I was on it. I would have Netflix on in the background sometimes, typing notes. Like I'm not even gonna lie. Sometimes notes gets really draggy, especially when you do a lot of content subjects. And for modern history, there's so many topics, so many points, like it gets hard to always be 100% switched on with notes. But that's why I feel like you can't 100% rely on notes at the same time. So I think write your notes, even if you write them and you're just kind of chilling out, like it's very like light studying, you're just kind of typing them up. Like sometimes I'd like, even in my free period, sometimes I'd be like typing notes like with my friends and we'd all be talking, or I'd be on FaceTime like at home typing up my notes. Like notes are one of those things where you can decide how much focus you want to have, but in the end you'll have the same product, at least in the notes, not in terms of your knowledge of them, but you'll have the same product in the notes. So I feel like having notes as a base, that's why it's important, but it's also why you should go to the next step of past practice questions, and then for essays, essay plans and responses. So these are the 3 study methods that I recommend. For now, guys, stay on top of your notes, and I think these holidays is a good time to catch up on notes. If you're not feeling keen to study and you're not feeling motivated, do not feel bad. That is so normal, and you guys need a break. So if you're not feeling too motivated, I think just do some light notes, like have your Spotify on, FaceTime your friends, have a show on the background, and literally just type the notes. Even if they're just typed and they're done, you can always come back to them and study them later. But just having them done and having that step and having that base, I think, is so important. And then a lot of the times, even if you aren't feeling motivated so far in the holidays, and again, the holidays, like you guys, it's like still in week 1, so it's completely fine if you haven't done any work yet or you're not planning to do it in the next couple of days. That's completely fine. But I feel like what was working for me when I wasn't feeling motivated, if I started with note taking, especially for modern, but I did really light note taking, music on in the background, just like an hour or 2 of just like typing whatever. that really helped me then build into some heavier study where I could get into learning those notes, into memorizing, into flashcards, and into those other techniques. So I feel like notes is a really good place to start. And if you're not feeling too keen with modern, because it's so easy to lose motivation in modern, just start light and don't let anyone talk you out of that. I really don't like some of the advice that goes on online about studying and note taking and just the mentality you have to have with studying, because it's a lot easier said than done. And I think everyone studies differently. Everyone has different levels of discipline, structure, and motivation. And there's nothing wrong with being super disciplined and being able to wake up at 5 a.m. and do 6 hours of study a day. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. Like, I have a lot of respect and value towards people that can do that, but I couldn't do that. And I'm sure quite a few of you watching that can't do that, or like are seriously just not bothered to do that. And that's completely fine. And just because you're not bothered to do that doesn't mean that you can't get a band 6 in modern, and doesn't mean that you can't get a 90 plus ATAR, 95 plus ATAR. There's no one way of studying, but I feel like a lot of advice online that you can find across the Facebook discussion group chat, that you can see on TikTok, that you can see on YouTube, that you can read on articles. I just feel like the general consensus is that you need to be doing this amount of study every single day, and this amount of work, and this way to study. And there's just very much that ideal year 12 way to study. So me saying this doesn't even just apply to modern, it's just in general in HSC. I think comparison is very difficult to deal with. So try to block it out as much as you can, and trust me, studying and trusting what works for you is so much better than pushing yourself to study in a way that isn't you and isn't how you work. Studying to your learning style is so important, and just going at your own pace, and also, keeping on top of your mental health and staying mentally okay is so important during year 12, because you can be like pushing yourself and mentally in distraught, and that's not the outcome we want, guys. So don't listen too much to any of that. Do what works for you. Even if it's light study at this point, just getting some work done is good. Start with base notes. If you guys start with that, then for short answers, I think the best hands down way to practice is past practice questions. And for essays, it's got to be essay plans and responses. I'll explain both of them. The only reason I say these two study methods is because I very much believe in studying for the exam. You're going to be assessed in trials and HSC the exact same way, with 50 marks of practice short answer questions, and then 2 25-mark essays. So it just, for me at least, it only makes sense to study in those two ways and to study for the exam. And I recommend that for other subjects as well. Study the way that the exam is structured, to put it into practice. So for short answer, past practice questions are really good sources of practice. Now, the modern history exam was changed in 2019, I'm pretty sure, the new syllabus. So there's quite a few practice questions and past papers that you can find from past HSC exams, but there's also trial questions that you can find online from trial papers, and then a lot of practice questions that you can find just on Google if you search like modern history core practice questions. Online, you can find a lot online to do practice with, and also different textbooks have practice questions and source practice as well. Even if you don't necessarily want to find a full practice question, you can just search some sources of like propaganda from the Nazi period, and then just look at it and be like, okay, how is it reliable? Is there bias? What's the perspective? And just ask yourself some of those questions as well. And then for the essays, I think the best options are essay plans and responses. Now, essay plans, I'm not sure if many of you guys have heard of them, but essay plans are, you'll take an essay question and then you'll kind of just write a judgment statement for it. So you decide the answer to it. And then you'll have like paragraph 1, 2, and 3. You'll like separate your paragraphs. Maybe your first paragraph is, I don't know, on the political influence, and the next one's on the social influence, and the third one's on the cultural influence. And then you'll just kind of have some points. Maybe you'll note down what like specific facts or what specific historian quotes you want to use from that. And it's basically just like a plan of your essay. It's just like a draft of it. That is such an effective study technique, because a lot of the essays, nearly most of them in modern history, are going to be judgment essays where you need to have a judgment and you need to have like your mind made up about a certain point. So I think essay plans are really good because you can literally have a judgment for every single dot point in the syllabus. And then when you get in on your trial day, on your HSC day, you'll see a question, but you already have your judgment decided, and you also know how you want to structure out your paragraphs, which already organizes your structure criteria, but also your judgment criteria. You already go in knowing what you want to argue rather than sitting there and being like, okay, do I want to argue this? And you know what it's like on the exam day. You see a question, you're like, oh, do I argue this? Oh, but what if I argue this? Oh, but like it's true, but it's false. Like you don't want to have to waste your time, especially modern history. It's 3 hours to do those 50 marks of short answers and two 25-mark essays. Like it's insane the time limit for so much work and so much writing. So essay plans are really good because it gets rid of that time that you physically have to plan and really sit there and like doubt yourself and decide. And then once you've done those essay plans, then you can move on to practice essays. I recommend essay plans. I know other people will say, oh, just write practice essays. But I think that doing essay plans first is really good because it can help you just build up that skill of modern history essay writing where you can build and structure those paragraphs. And then you take those plans and turn them into essays. Now, do you have to have an essay for every single plan? No. If you want to, go ahead, and obviously that's the goal. Like I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that. Like that is amazing. Personally I couldn't, but try to get as many as you can done of actual essays. If your teachers are marking responses, get them to read it and give them feedback. Otherwise you can give them to your friends, to other teachers at your school, whoever you can get feedback from, definitely go to for feedback. But I think essay plans, great way to study. They're also not too heavy. Like you can set an hour of study, for example, and maybe do like 30 minutes of essay plans and then like 3 practice questions. And that's such effective study and it's helping you directly for the exam. So those are my tips for modern history study. I feel like stopping at notes is a really big mistake that a lot of students are making, because there's already so much content and it's no use having all this content but not being able to apply it. And especially if you're going in on trials the first day, for the first time, and that's the first time that you're applying content, you don't actually have that skill of application. And I think that's across other subjects too. Same with memorizing essays in English. You can memorize an essay word for word, but if you haven't practiced applying your memorized essay to another question before the actual exam, it's not going to show up in your marks. So I think a lot, and one of the biggest mistakes in studying for like content subjects is that a lot of students are stopping just at the content, and it's like, okay, well, I know the content, that's all I need to know. But applying that content is so important, and the more you practice applying it, the better you'll find that your results are going to be. So that's my advice for that. We're going to go through short answer skills, short answer structuring, and then also essay structuring in different ways to write essays, how to form judgments, how to build theses, all of that, guys. We're going to go through all of that. So no stress here. Leave any questions about studying in the live chat. I'll be there live and we will discuss. But yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about studying for modern because I just don't think it's spoken about enough. And I think that everyone's very big on, it's just like notes or past papers, but it's just like, oh, study with notes or past papers. And no one really expands on that, or at least what I found when I was doing my HSC. I was very big on trying to find which study techniques were going to work best for me. And I personally was not the most disciplined. I'm not even gonna lie. I was not one of those 5 a.m. wake up 6 hour study days, like 3 past papers a week. I couldn't. Personally, I wasn't like that. So it was really hard for me to find advice that was working for me because I feel like a lot of the advice was along those lines. And again, nothing wrong with that. I will never discredit that study. I have so much respect for people that can study that way, but it wasn't me, and I'm sure quite a few of you can relate. Sometimes you just don't, it's just not within you. You just can't do it. I love to sleep. I very much was like I'd stay up late studying rather than like waking up early. So I just couldn't personally, but that's just me. But hopefully this helps you guys out. I think that those are the most effective ways of studying. In terms of studying and learning your notes, like I said, it's one thing to write your notes, but after you've written your notes, then you've got to learn them. There's obviously different ways that you can learn them. For me, what was working with learning my notes, I'd like have them all printed. I really liked reading them after I had typed them. And then I'd have them printed and I'd just try to like sit and read them and go through, you highlight, make them all pretty, look through them. But I wouldn't want to stop there because I knew that a lot of the time, like, when you're highlighting notes, just looks pretty. Like you feel like you're doing work, but are you doing anything? I was more focused on the aesthetic of my notes than I was on actually learning them. So what was working for me was flashcards. Of like main content points and main syllabus points. I try to organize my flashcards based off the syllabus point. And then one of the best study techniques that was working for me was teaching others, and if not, teaching myself. Teaching others was hard because unless your friends are doing modern, like it's very hard to just be like, hey, let me tell you about the Nazi regime between these periods, or let me tell you about the power struggle with Stalin. Like, very hard to sit with someone, and for someone, I also feel bad for the person who has to listen to that. So it's very hard to teach people unless they're doing modern. But teaching your friends, and if you don't have friends to teach, or your friends don't want to hear it, or they don't like that study technique, I'm being serious. Teach yourself. Now I've seen it on TikTok too, and I used to do this too, so I was so happy when I saw it. Turn your phone on, pray that you have some storage, but turn your phone on, get onto your camera, and legit just record yourself explaining the content, or like teaching. Either do that, or another thing I did, which probably sounds crazy, but I had a photo. I need to be careful how I say this because I've said this before and like it's come off wrong. I had a photo of kids, but they weren't kids. It was like animated kids in a classroom, and I had it like on my wall, and I would just sit and like teach them and pretend I was like speaking to them, explaining the notes. Now I know like a lot of you are probably like, this chick is literally insane, and I probably was. Like HSC can genuinely turn you insane, and you'll find yourself doing the craziest things to study. But that really helped me because I could sit and I could get it all out. And I think if you can teach the content, best believe you can answer the content, and you can answer questions. I think being able to teach it shows that you know it inside out. And as you're teaching it, you also find gaps where you're like, oh, wait, I don't actually know this point really well. And then you can stop and go back to that point and relearn it, and then practice teaching it. And it's just a really good way to find out what you know well, what you don't, and gain confidence. After like once I spent like an hour, 2 hours just like explaining all the content, or like going through the whole syllabus, and like I stopped and I was like, oh, I have like a 2 hour video of me talking about modern, and that made me feel really confident. And it's like, if I can speak about this for 2 hours, best believe I can answer 5 questions. So I think for your confidence as well, it's a very good technique. It feels awkward, like I'm not gonna lie, it's awkward, it's embarrassing. Like you have to sit and you have to like shut your inner thoughts out, because you're sitting there like, why am I talking to myself for an hour on camera, or why am I talking to a picture of animated children on the wall? But I promise you that study technique is really, really good for modern, just because there's so much content to deal with it all. Now there's obviously all different ways you can use, but flashcards and teaching myself and others were some of the best things that I did, just to notice what I knew, what I didn't, but also for your confidence. I think confidence in modern is hard to gain because there's just so much content, and your marks can be all over the place depending on your skills. If you're really good at short answers, if you're really good at essays, you can be really good at essays, but maybe you just get a question and it's just not one of the points that you know really well. And same with short answers, like there's obviously certain dot points that you don't feel the most confident with. So it's very much a hit or miss. So I think gaining confidence in modern is really important for your mentality, and then that's also going to help your marks. But yeah, that's my little rant about modern study. I am really hoping that some of you guys are talking in the chat and we're having a chat about studying and I'm not just ranting. But yeah, leave any other questions below. I want to get to all of those and I will answer all of those in the live chat. But I really hope that helps just for wrapping up modern, because I think surviving modern is a skill, it's a flex. Don't let anyone tell you that modern isn't hard, and don't let anyone, like if you complain about modern and someone's like, oh, at least it's not this, ignore. Ignore. Modern history students know the struggle, and I'm convinced that unless you do modern, um, you don't know. Like if I didn't do modern, I wouldn't have thought it was as hard, and like the nature of it is as challenging as it is. But it's a really challenging subject, and I'm not saying that to discourage you guys. It's to validate what you're feeling. I think it needs to be validated. Just because in the whole spectrum, like when people talk about hard subjects, like modern isn't brought up. But I think the way that it's assessed and the extent of content, definitely a hard one. But that's my rant, guys. Let's get moving.